Welcome. This is part 7 of a series we're calling Emotions and the Aging Process, a 10-part series featuring Dr. Ron Sepitelli. I'm Naomi Arenberg. Glad to have you along. By the way, before we begin our discussion, which focuses on managing feelings in caregiving situations, here's our website where you can go anytime for more information about the series. Vermont, smp.org/emotions. Vermont, S as in Sam, M as in Mary, and P as in pronunciation, .org/emotions. Ron, you've brought in a number of examples today, and you have our discussion all planned out. I'd like you in just a moment to start by telling us about your research project and some of the quotes that you've brought in from the aides you were working with, or the nurses you were working with. Particularly, there's a 40-year-old nurse veteran you're going to tell us about, and review some of the similarities and differences between an institutional setting, because people can be aging or being cared for in an institutional setting or at home.
Yes.
And there are some similarities and differences.
There's a lot here, Naomi. I just want to let you know that. So, so what happened in my research project, I had 5 aides who met with, each one met with one nursing home resident one time a week for 40 minutes. And then the 6 of us, those 5 and myself, we met 90 minutes every two weeks for 6 months. And these sessions were videotaped. And in these sessions, I essentially practiced receptive listening, and they could talk about anything they want. And I didn't try to judge, change, value, or help anything
Let me just
they
stop you
say.
here. So what was the purpose? Was the purpose for you just to monitor what they were saying, or was there some other therapeutic value?
Well, I originally started it to see if more attachment could be made to the residents, okay? But as we went along, I found out that their feelings were getting in their way, okay, of them performing their duties, and their interactions with the resident. Played a major role in their interactions with the resident was the feelings they were having with the resident, and the resident back to them as well.
Okay, let's jump right into some quotes from one of these aides you worked with. She says right at the top, "There is so much emotion involved in this work. There are so many people, so many personalities. The noise level gets to me too."
Yes.
Especially patient X. Through all that, it is exhausting. It gets sometimes so irritating, like you just have to go somewhere. You have to go somewhere, as you can't deal with it, run down the hall or close my door.
Yeah.
So here we are. I mean, I'm almost thinking of I hate to say it, a horror film, running down the hall and closing it all out.
Yeah, so
close out the monsters.
Right. So what she's really describing here is that emotion builds up. They have this anxiety, fear, anger, and so forth that is building up in them, and they have no place to talk about it. And so eventually they have to do something. So in her case, she's saying, run down the hall and so forth. So this is what happened. This goes on constantly. It's not just in nursing homes. It's in all institutions, in healthcare institutions, and at home, okay? For major home caregivers, it's a little different. Not that it's totally different, but in homes, there's a study called the Schultz study, which people really should look at. It was in 2007. You can get a copy of it on the internet. And what that study says, if there's a major caregiver in a home, that caregiver is more likely to be depressed, develop chronic illness, have less self-care, and die sooner than someone who's a non-caregiver. And that's because they really don't have any way to express these feelings because they're just with their loved one and so forth. And very often they're alone in their caregiving.
That's very scary.
It is. And it happens constantly.
And then, this is a tangent, but I guess I should say this brings up the question, what happens to the person being cared for when the caregiver is in such bad shape or dies? So that's like a whole related issue that we're not going to get into now. Right. But that's one of the scary aspects of all of this. So this researcher Schultz published the research in 2007. As you and I talk, it makes perfect sense in a way that it would not to the people who are in those trenches, in the healthcare trenches. So Schultz has the study. Is anything being done based on the study? Is there? I know you're working in the trenches, trying to improve things for people at home and in institutions.
Yes.
But in general, nationwide, worldwide, is anyone paying attention?
Well, there are a lot of people paying attention, and a lot of new ideas are being developed and worked, but it's mostly academic and learning, giving people, they call them tools, giving people tools and so forth and so on. What they are not dealing with, though, is the emotions involved in this. And in most cases, that's why medication is given out so much, is because they try to make themselves and the other people feel better. You know, Mary, who I talked about in the first couple of sessions, they were giving her massive doses of Haldol.
Which, again, is, what does Haldol do?
It's an antipsychotic medication, okay, to quiet her down because she was yelling and so forth. That's what they wanted to do for her, but really the staff, they were very anxious with her. It was really for the staff. It was really for them to manage their own feelings. And that, I notice, happens a lot.
Did it work?
They ended up taking her off of it. And what did work was me meeting with her, and you know, I spoke about what happened with her and so forth. Yeah.
Let's get back to the issue of drugs in just a moment.
Okay.
You have another powerful vignette about a 40-year veteran nurse.
Yes.
Will you share that with us?
Sure. This happened about a month ago. I met this nurse, and she had retired from nursing, and she said she was a 40-year hospital nurse. And I asked her, what was that like? And she said, well, what saved me was that I worked per diem. She said, I worked in different hospitals, different floors all the time. I can only imagine what it was like for those nurses that worked on the same floor. And then she said this. She said, I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm totally clean now. That happened about 10 years ago. And my last assignment working was in this hospital who had a brand new state-of-the-art oncology unit. She said it was the best there could be. She said, do you know that I would not walk into that oncology unit? And if I had to go down the hall and go through that oncology, I'd get on an elevator, go down floor, go around it, and so forth. I didn't want to go in there and see what I might be one day. So this tells two things. First of all, she's managing her feelings, okay? And the second is, when someone has cancer, even cured from cancer, you find out what's in their mind on a regular basis. She was constantly thinking, am I going to get it again? It's going to happen again, and so forth. And we need to talk about this stuff. And she said to me, after, you know, you're the first person I've ever told this story to. That's in a 15-minute conversation I had with her.
A powerful fact, because she is probably one of thousands, tens of thousands,
Yes.
who should be talking and dealing with these issues, if not every day, then on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So can you explain more what she meant by the advantage she feels she had working per diem, kind of being a temp?
Yes.
She might have been called in the non-medical world.
Yes. So what happens in hospitals is nurses get an assignment. So they'll get, let's say, 5 patients to work with on a unit and so forth. And now in hospitals, in ICU units of hospitals, 10 years ago, those patients would have been dead. That's how advanced technology has done it. And on regular floors, those patients would have been in an ICU unit 10 years ago. So they're dealing with very sick people. If someone gets better at all, they're gone home or they're gone to a rehab unit. So they have to deal with these patients who are very sick. They have lots of complicated medications they're giving, so they're tense all the time.
Because they might make a mistake.
Correct. And also this other thing happens. They see patients that really should be allowed to end their life peacefully and comfortably, and that all these different interventions that are just keeping them alive. I've heard stories where 6 machines were keeping people alive. And the nurses see this on a regular basis. And they not only have to deal with the patient, they have to deal with the doctors and with the family. And families sometimes, they're fighting with each other. You know, one of them wants to, let the patient die peacefully and comfortably. Another one says, no, try something else, and so forth. So this is the pressure these nurses are under all the time.
To me, what you're bringing up in my mind is that the nurses, each nurse is an individual in the nursing staff is really a pivotal point for this whole
Absolutely.
complex machine
Yes.
that has to go on 24 hours a day because they're in life and death situations.
Yes.
So you've set the scene for us, at least in an institution, and you talked a little bit about home care. The title of this episode, and by the way, it's episode 7 of Emotions and the Aging Process, 7 out of 10, is managing feelings. You gave us a couple of hints. There was the woman, just for example, talking.
Yep.
People, the caregivers, in particular aides and nurses, talking about their feelings. Tell us more about management.
Okay. If you could read the quote about the woman who makes the candles, okay, that'd be the bath salts,
Yeah.
okay, then I can explain there how they're managing their feeling or the attempt they're doing and why they do it, okay?
Great. So this is one aide who was in the group
Yes.
you described a few minutes ago. She talked about making bath salts that produce an aroma that the aide thought was soothing and quieting to the agitated residents.
Correct.
So again, she's putting it on them.
Correct.
She's saying, this is going to make you
Yep.
calm down. The aide said this, that's why I make bath salts, because the residents are getting calming and we are getting calming. Okay, so she's owning that somewhat. It makes everybody else calm. Calm down, everybody, in every room. That way you could do anything you want with them and they wouldn't even know it. And we would be happy too. We'd be happy not doing anything.
Right. This is a very powerful statement because what she's saying here is the goal is for her and the staff to be calm. And so we do interventions with them to calm ourselves down.
Analyze this for me a bit. Is this good or bad? Calming sounds like a valuable, help me out here with
Yeah.
the word, a valuable tack to take.
Okay.
But are they quashing their feelings? Are they trying to pretend there are no feelings?
Well, I mean, this is, it's actually a failed attempt. This is the goal of what they're trying to
Okay.
do, okay? And, how they manage the feelings, I'll tell you what a nurse recently told me who's seen some of the episodes we've done. She said, looking at, this episode she explained, she said, I realize there is a lot of stress in my job. I have a lot of stress, but I don't take it out on my fellow workers. But what I realize, I take it out at home on my family.
By doing what?
Yelling at them, okay, being irritable, complaining about what their family members are doing, so forth. And she was just that was finally coming into her mind on what she was doing. So that they manage feelings in many ways. Okay, I mean, eating, drinking, lying, all these different types of defenses that people use.
Tell us more about the bath salts and the nurse in this context. So you're talking with these nurses and the aides, and so she's making the bath salts and using them and creating aromas that at least she described as calming.
Correct.
And so she's really trying to manage her own feelings, at least imagining she's managing
Correct.
feelings, which is to say, on the positive side, she's, one, articulating that there are feelings, there are emotions that need to be dealt with.
Correct.
I'm guessing there are some other strategies that you would advise, not just the bath salts,
Right.
which have to do with analyzing what's going on. You had a really great analogy in some other episode where, if you put your finger on a hot stove burner or a candle, you draw it away because it was painful.
Right.
So that's a physical pain that everyone can identify with. We're less good in general at identifying emotional or psychological pain and figuring out what to do with it.
That's correct. And actually, the project that I did showed how to deal with the feeling, to deal with the feelings, and allowing them to talk about all their thoughts. And these aides were not telling other people this stuff. And then this is the first time this woman told the other people that why she made the bath salts. So sitting where you're not judged, valued, try to change or be helped, and just being able to say all your thoughts and feelings in language, okay, actually gives a relief, releases those feelings in a sense, so you don't act out on them as much. So the nurse won't yell at her children so much, okay? But, and people become more curious about what's going on around them.
That sounds like an important word, curiosity.
Yes.
Instead of pretending there's nothing going on, get curious about it
You're right.
and try to understand
Why
it.
am I doing that? Why are you doing that?
So what other strategies do you have? I know you did your study, and that was an academic study, and now you actively work with nurses and other caregivers, with patients. What's your advice about managing feelings?
Everyone needs a safe place to put all their thoughts and feelings into language where they're not judged, valued, tried to change, be changed, or helped. They need to be able to express them and so forth. When that happens, and people are allowed to do that over time, then they become curious. They become curious not only about themselves, they become curious about their colleagues, they become curious about patients, they become curious about family members. Instead of criticizing someone that's different, or criticizing someone who's not responding the way you want them to respond, you start wondering, okay, why are they not? What am I saying to this person? What am I doing that's not, that this person's responding to me in this negative way?
So you're creating relationships.
Correct.
Meaningful relationships.
Absolutely. Oh,
That
excuse me,
makes-
I'm not. They're creating.
You're helping them.
I'm just facilitating it.
Thank you. What about the crises that I imagine are common daily? Whether it's a health crisis, someone's oxygen level falls critically low, or you have the patient who's screaming uncontrollably. It's one thing, it's easy, as they say, talk is cheap. You and I can sit here and
Yep.
what you're saying makes perfect sense about building relationships and really having a team,
Yes.
whether it's in an institution or a home setting. What do you do in the crisis moment? How do you handle that?
You mean as a healthcare worker?
Yeah, suppose I were the aide who
Yeah.
made the bath salts, and last night the bath salts were great, they worked, and now there are 5 patients screaming.
Yes.
I'm supposed to take care of all of them.
Okay, well, so that's a very good question. So hopefully, if the aides are part of a group, and they all put all their thoughts and feelings into language, they're all going to start talking about what goes on with their patients and what they've done and their interventions and so forth and so on. So what happens, you develop a much wider array of interventions that you can now use. Or you're now safe, you feel safe, that I can go and ask Mary for help. Okay? In my research project, one aide talked about another aide being verbally abusive to a yelling patient who had dementia, okay? Didn't know where she kept yelling, I'm cold, I'm cold, I'm cold, and this aide used to tell her to shut up, okay? And this other aide heard that, so she went to the administrator and she said to the administrator, I'd like to be able to, you help me talk to this aide because I think I have interventions that would be helpful. She was afraid to talk to the other aide. The problem was this. The administrator then said to the aide, the one who was asking for this, that she had done things wrong, and if she turned her in, she was going to turn the aide who was saying this in for things that she'd done wrong.
So violating a whistleblower law, but
She wasn't whistleblowing.
she was actually asking for help.
She was asking, she wanted to help. But the thing is, was the administrator listening? The administrator wasn't listening. She didn't realize that this aide wanted to help, wanted to figure out a way, and so the administrator looked at it as though she wanted, this woman to get, the other aide to get in trouble, and she just wanted help. So the aide's response in our groups, she said, I'll never talk to her again, the administrator.
And then what happened? Was there any other recourse? Or
I
that
don't
was
know.
it,
They
that
were
was
just
the
describing,
end of the road?
they were describing something that may have happened 2 years earlier. I don't know when it happened, but this is what happens.
Talk a little bit, please, about the home situation. You mentioned the Schultz study.
Yes.
Can you give us an example of people you work with or have worked
Sure.
with in the privacy
Yes.
of their own homes
Yeah.
and what they need to do, some of their management techniques?
Well, with a major caregiver, okay, now that's a person who's spending most of the time as caregiving of that person. So there may be nurses coming in, VNA, or someone coming in to clean a house or something like that. But I'm talking about someone who stays home most of the time. I talked to a woman recently who's working, and her husband stays home. He can get around a little bit for himself, so he can feed himself. And she said that she has not left him alone for 5 years other than working. She has no vacations, nothing. And she told me that she wonders sometimes, when is this going to end? Am I going to live this way the rest of my life? Now again, she's someone, she told to me, you know, they're the first person I've ever said anything like that. So this is what's really going on with the home caregivers. Another one told me of her husband who was demented, and she was trying to take care of him herself in her home. And she had all these friends who would come over and say, oh, we support you, call me anytime, and so forth and so on. And she said, guess what? None of them helped me.
But does she call on them?
She does not, well, she has called on him a little bit, okay, but it's only in a sense of maybe giving him a ride somewhere. But as far as the caregiving at home, and so what happens is a lot of times the friends of caregivers, they confuse pity with compassion. They pity the person, and that's what happened. They don't really want to take charge of it, okay, and get involved, especially with dementia. I mean, caregivers of someone with dementia, I think most of them would say they're very lonely, and they feel alone. So they need more people. They need friends, they need family, they need community to get there and form groups. So, and actually the person being cared for becomes part of the group as well.
How can we build those teams?
Well, I think that has to be grassroots. And it's done sometimes. I mean, some families do that, and neighbors. I mean, there's tons of stuff where people come and help each other and give rides, and it's really wonderful what is out there. And that needs to be organized more and not perpetuated, but to be the first choice instead of the last choice.
Also, to go back to your whole premise of receptive listening, which is tied in closely with being curious about what's making someone else tick, what's making myself tick. If we do more of that, and we, as you say, a grassroots level in neighborhoods with neighbors and friends, I think we're more likely to pick up on what does someone need? What does the caregiver or the care receiver need? And what do I have to give? So I think part of the fear is on the part of a friend who might have the best intentions is of being sucked in to this bottomless pit.
Right.
So I think of raising children. There's the old formula. When a kid is 2 years old, give him 2 choices for breakfast. When he's 3, give him 3, and make them choices that are available. Don't say, what do you want for breakfast? Say, do you want cereal? Do you want Cheerios or scrambled eggs? Be very specific, because that's what you can do. Because if you say, what do you want? The kid says pork chops, and you don't have them. So we need to talk with each other as adults with that clarity. Say, this is what I can do. I can give a ride. I can wash the dishes. Let's figure this out together, but
Correct.
again, working as a team.
Correct, and if they meet regularly as a group, 2 things happen. First of all, the patient will be seen more as a human being than as someone with Alzheimer's or a stroke or something, which scares
is
people.
Less than somehow different.
Correct.
It's other. It's not quite fully human.
People just stay away, okay? So all of a sudden that person gets humanized, and the group in itself becomes organic. The group, something grows out of the group. So then people can, when they find out, maybe I can just give rides, but wait a minute, I realize that for 4 hours in the afternoon, the patient takes a nap, or I could sit there for 4 hours and take a nap, or I could cook something, and then you put all these things together, and people can work together, and so then it becomes something positive. And then the caregivers become curious, develop curiosity, and they develop new interventions and new ways to work with the whole group.
Especially when there are communication issues, which there can be with dementia or other issues that are common with aging people, but not exclusive to them.
Oh,
You can
yes.
have a stroke when you're 25 years old. If you can't speak or move all the parts of your body, that's when I imagine you really need that team, the people around you, to be that team and try as hard as possible to figure out what you, the patient,
Yes.
needs, because you cannot communicate.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And with younger children now, our technology keeps people alive, and so there are people who can't communicate. Younger children and their family members are the only ones taking care of them, get very little outside support. They need tremendous amounts of support.
Dr. Ron Sepitelli, this session has flown by.
It has.
This is segment 7, Managing Feelings in Emotions and the Aging Process. Next week, we will be back with receptive listening.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our website is vermontsmp.org/emotions. Vermont, S. Sally M. Mary P. Paul.org/emotions. Emotions and the Aging Process is also reachable by phone at, are you ready? Get out that pencil. 802-356-3388. 802-356-3388. And there's email, info@vermontsmp.org. info@vermontsmp.org. Thanks again for joining us. Dr. Ron Sepitelli, I'm Naomi Arenberg.